something broke, before anyone said a word. A champagne flute exploded against the marble, skittering into 1,000 tiny suns, and the mansion's foyer swallowed the echo like it had practice. "I'm done," announced the 7th nanny in 3 months, suitcase yawing open like a wounded mouth. "Sir, I can't work where the furniture is better trained than the children." She yanked a wad of gum from her skirt with 2 fingers and held it up like evidence. They booby-trapped the dining chairs. Again. Before we continue, please click on that subscribe button, like this video, and comment which country you're listening from. I'd love to know where you're watching me from. Thank you. Malik Thompson pinched the bridge of his nose and tried to remember the last time this house felt like a home and not a public relations problem. He was supposed to be in a boardroom convincing a Fortune 500 to stop bleeding market share. Instead, he was in a hallway convincing a stranger not to write a 1-star review of his family. "Triple severance," he said, voice flat with practice. "And a car to wherever you're going." "Quadruple," she countered without looking back, wheeling toward daylight. "And I'm warning every agency from Buckhead to Brooklyn." The door blew shut behind her with the same polite finality as a gavel. He heard it then. 3 distinct beats on the grand staircase, synchronized like a drum line that only plays trouble. Patrice glided down, nails ticking the banister in metronome time. 10 in the morning, and she was already camera-ready. Silk blouse the color of old money, pearls like a thesis statement, not a hair acknowledging gravity. "Another one?" she asked, sympathy packaged in a smile that didn't crease anywhere real. "They locked her in the panic room yesterday," Malik said, still watching the door as if apologies might return through it. Security had to override the system, again. Patrice checked her reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting the angle of perfection. "Children test boundaries," she said. "Perhaps your expectations are aspirational." "I'm paying 3 times market," he said. "Then perhaps the market is wrong." She snapped on white gloves like the morning was sterile, and she intended to keep it that way. "Spa, lunch, gala planning, I'm fully booked. Can you watch them until I reschedule interviews?" "Darling," she said, drawing out the word like a receipt. "That is why we employ help." The door closed softly behind her, and the house exhaled something that wasn't relief. "Dad!" 3 small hurricanes spilled into the foyer, identical faces, identical suits in 3 different states of disarray. In 5 years, Malik had learned their distinctions the way a sommelier knows notes in a wine. Elijah led with audacity, Darnell with angles, Xavier with charm. "We didn't mean to make her cry," Xavier offered, grinning the grin that solved problems he created. "Boys," Malik said, crossing his arms. 7 nannies in 3 months? I'm not running a revolving door, I'm running payroll." They traded looks the way brothers do when their thoughts share a Wi-Fi network. Elijah's bravado dimmed first. "They always leave anyway," he muttered, the words small enough to hide behind. The sentence hit harder than the glass. In the adoption world, every goodbye is a scar that never fully domesticated. Data says kids who bounce through caregivers aren't difficult. They're on defense. Malik squatted so his eyes found theirs. "I'm not leaving," he told all 3 foreheads and the whole frightened universe under their curls. "Even when I should be in a meeting, especially then." He pulled his phone from his pocket and before the anxiety could argue, canceled his board presentation. "Here's what we're going to do," he said. "All of us are writing a new job post together. We'll say what we really need. Must have a sense of humor. Must understand that plastic spiders are science, not a crisis. And must not scream," Darnell added, practical. "We'll finesse the language," Malik said. "Also, pancakes. Whoever burns them has dish duty for a week." Their cheer rose like steam. For the first time in weeks, the sound didn't bounce off cold surfaces. It warmed them. 3 days later, his study looked like an HR office, and a kindergarten had shaken hands. Resumes fanned across his desk, most scented with ambition and proximity to wealth. Mrs. Brooks, the housekeeper who ran this house like a quiet nation, appeared in the doorway, cheeks pink from hurrying. "Mr. Thompson, someone's here about the nanny position. No appointment." "Name?" She said Mo'Nique Williams, from the neighborhood network. Mrs. Brooks's eyebrows floated. "Feels different." "Let her in," he said, curiosity prying open a window. The young woman who stepped through wore a navy dress that chose function over flourish and shoes built for long days. Natural hair anchored in a neat bun. Kind eyes that didn't flinch. "I know this is unorthodox," she said, voice soft but sure. "But some qualifications don't show on paper. I heard you're looking for someone who can hear what boys say when the words aren't ready yet." Something about the cadence tugged at an old part of Malik's memory, a radio station he hadn't tuned to in years. "Experience?" he asked. 8 years. Not always titled nanny, but always the person families called when behavior was a puzzle, not a crime. Kids act out when they're afraid, usually of being left. He didn't remember standing, but he was at the French doors when shouting erupted outside. The boys had hacked the pool cleaner. Jets arced at random like a misbehaving fountain in Vegas. Mrs. Brooks, apron-drenched, was cursing in a language only church ladies and Navy veterans know. "Excuse me," he said, already moving. "May I?" Mo'Nique asked, and slipped past him. On the patio, Chaos auditioned for a scholarship. "That is some elegant engineering?" she called over the spray. "Who mapped the control panel?" 3 heads jerked. They'd been braced for thunder. They got weather talk. "I read the manual," Darnell confessed. "I tested the sequence," Elijah said. "I provided distraction," Xavier added, dimples weaponized. "Teamwork?" she nodded. "Now show me how you'll fix it." Mrs. Brooks looks like she's considering another career. 30 seconds later, still wet but beaming, they restored order. "Thank you," Mrs. Brooks puffed, squeezing water from her apron. "Smart little men." "We're sorry," Xavier said genuinely. Malik's mouth opened, but no sound came. He'd never heard an apology land in this courtyard without a bribe or a threat clearing the runway first. Inside, he poured coffee he suddenly needed. "How did you do that?" he asked. "I told the truth," Mo'Nique said. "They're clever and bored. Let's give their clever a job." He should have thanked her and returned to spreadsheets. Instead, he found himself saying, "Can you start Monday?" She blinked, surprised by the speed. "Don't you want to call references?" "I've interviewed resumes," he said. "I'd like to hire results." Monday dawned with the threat of an ambush. The boys had been up since 5, whispering. Mo'Nique arrived early in jeans and a sweater, hair in a practical ponytail, eyes bright like a coach before a championship game. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said when they thundered into the kitchen. "I made pancakes." The triplets froze. Pancakes are often the Trojan horse of discipline. "What kind?" Darnell asked cautiously. "Investigate," she smiled. Xavier took the first bite and collapsed, laughing. "They're purple and taste like bubble gum," Elijah gasped, clutching his sides. "Food coloring and extract," she said, satisfied. "Welcome prank immunity for week 1. But we negotiate a truce. Weird breakfast Wednesday. Deal?" "Deal!" they chorused, syrup crowning their chins like laurels. Malik watched the scene with a feeling he hadn't let himself feel since the adoption papers. Gratitude edged with awe. Breakfast, typically a choreographed skirmish, became a council meeting. They debated pancake geometry and future flavors as if drafting a constitution. When he finally tore himself away for the office, he paused at the mudroom. "Call me if anything." "We'll be fine," Mo'Nique said. "You go be important. We'll go be 7. He did not get a single emergency call. By mid-afternoon, the quiet unnerved him enough to cancel his last meeting and drive home. From the kitchen window, he saw an obstacle course bloom across the lawn. Chair tunnels, rope swings, a balance beam made from pool noodles and hope. The boys weren't sabotaging. They were building. Mo'Nique coached like a benevolent foreman. Remember, teamwork beats speed. Darnell, shift the hoop 3 feet. Elijah, spot your brother. Xavier, count it down. Give your crew a rhythm. He stepped onto the patio so the gratitude had somewhere to go. How was your first day? He asked. Educational, she said, eyes still on the boys. They're bright, creative, and loyal. They test adults because abandonment is a teacher with perfect attendance. When you've been left, you rehearse leaving. He swallowed. How do we stop the rehearsal? Consistency. Play that asks something of their brains and gives their bodies a job. Adults who mean what they say and say what they mean. She glanced at him, the kind of look that weighs and doesn't judge. You're already doing the most important part. Showing up. Night fell and the house softened. Malik stood in the doorway of his son's room while Mo'Nique read, voices rising and falling in a harmony that felt older than them all. He watched 3 heads tilt toward the same sound, watched anxiety unspool into trust, watched this woman turn chaos into choreography without ever raising her voice. In the kitchen, he poured 2 mugs of tea because gratitude tastes better shared. You feel familiar, he said, then immediately regretted the intimacy of it. Mo'Nique's smile flickered, then steadied. Maybe I just sound like someone who listens. He laughed, short, surprised, grateful. Maybe. On his phone, a news alert flashed another headline about elite families and rotating caregivers. A trend dressed as a statistic, but he closed it. Statistics don't braid hair or unteach fear. People do. Upstairs, the boys were finally quiet. Downstairs, the house breathed easier than it had in months. In his chest, something unclenched. Malik didn't know it yet, but the day the house chose sides wasn't the day the nanny quit. It was the day a stranger praised disobedience as design and handed 3 small boys the dignity of a second try. See you at breakfast, Mo'Nique said, pocketing a list the boys had made for Weird Wednesdays. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, Mr. Thompson, children don't need perfect, they need present. After she left, Malik stood alone in a quiet big enough to hear his own promise. I'm not going anywhere. Outside, Atlanta hummed its late-day blues. Sirens far off, cicadas practicing stamina, a train reminding the city that arrivals and departures happen whether we approve or not. Inside, a different rhythm took root. Tomorrow, there would be more mess, more math, more chances to mean what he said. But for the first time in a long time, he believed the house might learn another song. By the end of week 2, the mansion moved on a different current. Breakfast no longer sounded like a marching band in a sink. It sounded like a small think tank with maple syrup. Weird Breakfast Wednesday produced green waffles that tasted like mint and a heated debate over whether pancakes could be engineered into dodecahedrons. Homework drifted from battle to banter. Even Mrs. Brooks, who measured morale by the decibels of apology she heard after sunset, started humming again. Mo'Nique didn't preach. She engineered conditions. The boys learned jobs for their energy. Elijah ran operations, Darnell design, Xavier communications. She stuck star charts to the pantry door for kindness and follow-through instead of obedience, and the boys chased those stars like they paid interest. At bedtime, she read the same page twice when grief showed up late to the story. When tantrum snapped, she handed each boy a jump rope, then jumped with them until the anger lost its breath. It felt less like childcare and more like a clinic disguised as play. Malik noticed he was breathing differently too. It's strange what steadiness reveals when the noise stops. He started sitting on the floor in sock feet, assembling Lego cities without checking his phone every third brick. He started hearing the hollows in his marriage. One evening, the house glowed soft around them. The boys sprawled on the rug, building a bridge that refused to defy physics. Mo'Nique cross-legged nearby, turning pipe cleaners into suspension cables. Malik leaned on the doorway and let honesty do the talking before hesitation could vote. "You're different," he said. She looked up. "Different how?" "You don't wrestle behavior, you translate it. Most acting out is a dialect of fear," she said. "Kids with early instability learn to audition adults. If you'll leave anyway, better to cause it on your terms." He exhaled a truth that had been camping behind his sternum. "We adopted them at 2. We promised forever, but we delivered turnover. 7 nannies in 3 months is not a sermon about stability." Mo'Nique wrapped a pipe cleaner around his observation. "Then give them a new sermon. Consistency and curiosity. Discipline that teaches, not just stops." Later that week, Patrice appeared in the kitchen at 7:30 a.m., crisp in an ash-blue pantsuit that could cut glass. She rarely entered the working parts of the house before noon. The coffee machine hissed like a cat that didn't trust the moment. "Morning," she said, tone pleasant, eyes calculating. "I've enrolled the boys in piano, tennis, and advanced math tutoring. Private instructors. They'll start Monday." Malik set down his mug. "When did you decide this?" "Yesterday. They're falling behind their peers in enrichment. This is what families like ours do." "They're 7, Mo'Nique offered carefully. "Their current routine is balanced. Play with purpose, skill building without pressure. Overstructuring can spike anxiety." Patrice turned, smile trimmed to the millimeter. "I appreciate your input, but their mother knows what's best." The word landed like a dropped tray. Mo'Nique's expression didn't change, but something in the room flinched. Malik saw it, a flash like a memory trying to surface. "Our sons," he said evenly, "and we decide together." Patrice's smile cooled. "Noted. I have a luncheon and a committee meeting. Do handle the chaos." She pivoted out, a draft of perfume and disapproval following. When the door side shut, Elijah whispered, "Do we have to wear tiny tennis shirts?" "Not unless you love tiny shirts," Mo'Nique said, and the room laughed its fear away. That night, after the boys fell asleep in a tangle of elbows and loyalty, Malik and Mo'Nique sat with tea at the kitchen island, the place where confessions feel less like crimes. He told the truth he'd been avoiding. "We don't talk," he said of his marriage. "We announce schedules at each other. We pose for other people's cameras. I can't remember the last time she asked what kept me up at night." Mo'Nique didn't offer platitudes. "Some people marry for love," she said, voice careful. "And some marry for other currencies, security, status, access. If 2 people are spending different money, it gets expensive." He rubbed his face. "I keep wondering if I missed what she was telling me at the start, because I wanted the story so badly." "Wanting is loud," she said. "Listening is quieter." He stared at the tea as if answers might steep out of it. "If you were me, if you needed to know what your marriage was actually built on, how would you test it?" "I wouldn't," she said quickly, then softened. "But if you did, make sure your test doesn't harm your boys." Research he'd skimmed months ago rose up like an old friend. When sudden wealth or sudden loss hits a household, relationships either deepen or deflect. He thought about the way Patrice had handled yesterday's mother declaration like a trophy. He thought about how she photographed charity and outsourced compassion. He hated himself for considering it. Then started texting people who would keep a secret on principle. The plan wasn't elegant, but it was surgical. His general counsel would move liquid assets into protected trusts Patrice didn't know existed. His accountant would let a rumor breathe. Irregularities, a jittery client, a murmured SEC inquiry. A competitor would time an attack that looked opportunistic, not choreographed. On paper, it would read as a slow-motion financial fire. In reality, it was a drill in a building with sprinklers. The boys wrestled a stuffed shark in the hallway, squealing in triumph. He looked toward the sound and felt the weight of the choice he was making. "The test stops the second it hurts them," he said aloud, as if swearing in a chapel. "Then you don't have to worry," Mo'Nique replied. "You already said the only sentence that matters." Monday began with a controlled detonation. His assistant burst into the office, face ashen. "Our largest client just pulled their contract. They're citing concerns about internal controls." By lunch, a niche industry blog posted a speculative piece. Thompson Holdings weathering turbulence? By evening, 2 more websites recycled the rumor with poorer grammar and louder fonts. The group chat Malik never read suddenly pulsed with condolences from men who competed with him for tables and views, not truth. At home, the routine held. Weird Breakfast Wednesday arrived on schedule with pancakes shaped like question marks that tasted like vanilla. Mo'Nique moved through the house like an antidote. Playlists low, homework steady, snacks appearing at the right second to prevent an unnecessary war. Patrice, meanwhile, orbited faster. She accepted 3 invitations in one afternoon and added a wardrobe delivery to tomorrow's calendar. At dinner she scrolled, fork idle on salmon she'd asked the chef to plate, then decided she didn't want. "Rough day?" she asked, not glancing up. "Rough week," Malik said. "It will pass. Everyone has a quarter like this," she said, tone airy, as if discussing pollen. After the boys were tucked, he found Mo'Nique rinsing dishes with sleeves pushed to her forearms, humming something that sounded like hope with a backbeat. "You okay?" she asked, shutting the tap. He hadn't realized he wanted someone to ask until she did. "I will be," he answered. "Thank you for keeping their days normal. They don't need the grown-up weather report." "That's what families do," she said. "The adults hold the roof." He leaned on the counter and let a truth slip he'd been guarding. "Were you ever married?" She hesitated, then offered the gentlest shape of an answer. "I came close once. Life turned. I learned that love survives detours, but expectations don't always." He didn't press. The familiarity he couldn't place flickered again. Her voice, the shape of certain words, the way the boy's shoulders dropped a centimeter when she entered a room. He filed the feeling away under mysteries that might solve themselves if left alone. Wednesday afternoon, the 3rd domino clicked. A local business channel splashed a lurid chyron about Thompson woes, and a clipped analyst talked like he was paid by the syllable. Malik turned the TV off before the boys wandered in. Patrice's calendar got fuller. His house got calmer. The contrast wrote its own caption. That night, she breezed into the kitchen near 10, heels scolding the marble. "I didn't realize staff were still lingering," she said to Mo'Nique, tone lacquered. "We were reviewing the boys' day," Malik said, not moving. Patrice turned a page in her attitude. "You'll fix this, darling. These things always work out." Her hand fluttered toward him without landing. "I'm exhausted. Remember the Warren anniversary gala Saturday? The photographer adores us." After she left, Malik laughed once. The kind of laugh that isn't humor so much as release. "Did you hear concern?" I keep replaying the sentence and I'm not finding it. Mo'Nique set 2 mugs of chamomile between them. "Some people imagine resilience means ignoring a storm," she said. "Resilience is staying in the room and holding someone's fear without trying to tidy it." He wrapped both hands around the mug. "Stay?" he asked, hating the nakedness in the word. She didn't blink. "I'm not going anywhere." Thursday morning, his counsel called with a voice that carried both caution and respect. "Everything's where it should be. On paper, it looks bad." "On purpose," Malik said. "The market will believe what it's fed. So will marriages," he said, and hung up before doubt could linger. By Friday, his phone was a theater marquee of reactions. Old acquaintances texted question marks dressed as prayers. Vendors asked about invoices delicately. The boys built a cardboard city and named streets after inside jokes. Mo'Nique introduced a new ritual at dinner, each person naming one thing they were proud of that day. Elijah chose sharing my markers even when I didn't want to. Xavier chose not quitting the reading puzzle when it got tricky. Darnell chose fixing the thing I broke before someone else had to. Malik said showing up and didn't look at anyone in particular, which is how truth sometimes finds its mark. Later, after the house quieted, Patrice drifted in wearing a dress engineered to be photographed. "I need to talk," she said, finally looking focused. "Now?" he asked. She perched on the bar stool like it might leave if she didn't tame it. How bad is it really? Bad enough to unmask a marriage, he thought. Bad, he said aloud. She stared at the window as if the answer might be hiding in the night. Then I need to think, she said, about my options. The words landed with the clean cruelty of a note slid under a door. Malik didn't argue. Some tests grade themselves. He walked to the doorway of the boys' room and listened to their sleep. In the dark, he made a private promise to the universe, the boys, and whatever part of himself still believed in vows. Whatever breaks next, it won't be them. In the morning, the headlines got louder. So did his certainty. The first real fracture didn't crack the marble. It cracked the silence. Thursday at dawn, while the boys dreamed of obstacle courses and purple pancakes, Malik's phone pulsed with a headline that sounded like a title warning. Thompson Holdings under scrutiny. Major contract pulled. He'd designed the tremor with his legal team, a controlled burn to see what his marriage was built from. He hadn't accounted for the smell of smoke to stir old grief, the memory of hustling alone, of wanting a family that chose him back. He hadn't accounted for how much he'd hate himself for running a test at all. By noon, a business blog amplified the story with the grace of a car alarm. By 3, a finance influencer in a blazer the color of ambition recorded a 6-minute segment from a ring-lit kitchen, forecasting doom with a smile that promised ad revenue. Malik glanced across the pool, where the triplets were timing each other's cannonballs with a stopwatch Mo'Nique had turned into a math lesson. In their world, the sky stayed blue. Patrice's world got shinier. She posted a boomerang from the back seat of a town car with the caption, "On to the next," and interlaced her day with luncheons, board photos, and an appointment for gowns that sheath better in photographs than in life. That evening, she finally appeared in the kitchen, hands soft with lotion, tone sharper than her manicure. "How bad?" she asked, looking at her reflection in the refrigerator, stainless. "Bad enough to need us both," Malik said. She blinked like cameras were present. "We'll be fine. People like us bounce." The word us was air, light, well-practiced, weightless. After bedtime, Malik told Mo'Nique the part he hadn't said aloud. "This started as a stress test," he confessed, the phrase tasting wrong in his mouth. "I needed to know what my marriage was full of, but I hate how it feels. I hate that I even needed to know." Mo'Nique didn't flinch or scold. "You made a hypothesis," she said softly, "and now you're looking at data. Just don't let an experiment turn into a habit." She studied his face. "You look like a man holding a building." "I am," he said. "It's shaped like 3 boys." The next 48 hours moved like weather, predictable in pattern, still startling in force. On Friday morning, Patrice intercepted him mid-sip of coffee, pearls on, patience off. "Okay," she said briskly. "Walk me through the forecast. Is this temporary or terminal? Which assets are we liquidating? Will we need to resign from any committees before anyone else hears we're constrained?" Malik waited for the word "we" to grow roots. It didn't. I need a partner, he said quietly. Not a co-host. She paced to the window, the house reflecting in the glass like a memory already filing for deletion. I need to think, she pronounced at last, about my options. When the door shut behind her, the room felt honest. Mo'Nique appeared with the boys' lunchboxes, each labeled in block letters, E, D, X, and a faint furrow between her brows that always meant she was about to say something kind and precise. I can't pay you, he blurted, shame rushing out before he could edit it. Not past this week, not fairly. She placed the lunchboxes down like evidence of steadiness. Then don't think of me as staff, she said. Think of me as family. She held his gaze until he believed her. You don't pay family to stay when it rains. Saturday detonated. Malik's lawyer called at 8:12 a.m. with the clipped tone attorneys use to keep clients upright. She's filed, he said. Had divorce. And there's more. Her counsel attached a restraining order request alleging she feels unsafe. She's waiving rights to marital assets and relinquishing parental rights. The word relinquishing hollowed the room. Malik looked toward the mudroom where 3 bright raincoats hung like punctuation marks. Understood, he managed. Handle it. Shield the boys. He found Mo'Nique in the den building, a blanket fort big enough to shelter a bad day. When he told her, her face went still. Grief, then fury, then a practiced tenderness that said she knew how to handle fragile truths. How do I tell them? He asked. The question a confession. Together, she said, with enough truth for today. They waited until the afternoon light warmed the living room into a safer temperature. The triplets climbed onto the couch they'd conquered 1,000 times with forts and flips, sensing the grown-up seriousness, but not its shape. Malik swallowed. The words he'd rehearsed in the shower got lost behind the ones his heart picked. Boys, he began, I need to tell you something about Patrice. Is she sick? Elijah asked, first as always. No, baby, Malik said, pulling them closer until he could feel their knees against his thighs. She's not sick. She's decided to live somewhere else and she won't be coming back. Silence expanded, stretched, and then snapped. Did we do something wrong? Darnell whispered, voice already bracing for punishment. Absolutely not, Malik said, the 2 words a bridge. This is not about you. It's about grown-up choices that don't make sense even to grown-ups. Xavier's eyes flooded so fast it felt like weather. Will you leave too when things are hard? Never, Malik said, fierce and simple. I am not a leaving person. I am a staying person. Monique's voice braided to his, steady and warm. It's okay to be sad, to be mad, to feel everything. We'll feel it with you, and we'll still do Weird Breakfast Wednesday. The smallest laugh tripped through tears. For 10 minutes they sat in the oldest way families sit, close, tangled, listening to the clock count steady. When the boys' breathing settled, Malik asked the question he dreaded. Do you want to say goodbye? 3 heads shook no in the same rhythm. Elijah, brave even with his lip quivering, said, Can we have ice cream? Yes, Mo'Nique said. 3 scoops. That night, with the house finally asleep, Malik and Mo'Nique stood in the dim kitchen, the room where vows felt truer than in churches some days. I need to show you something, he said, pulling open the digital vault in his mind and finally his phone. The losses are smoke. The assets are protected. I staged it to learn what I didn't want to learn. He braced for anger that would be justified. Instead, her expression held something more devastating. Hurt. You should have trusted me with that, she said quietly. Not because I deserve your balance sheet. Because family deserves truth. He nodded, the apology leaving before the explanation. I'm sorry. I didn't want to risk losing the only steady thing in this house. You won't, she said, and the sentence landed like a key turning. But don't test me to believe me. Just watch me. Then she did something small and enormous. She reached for his hand and laced her fingers with his in a way that made room for the future without crowding the present. The kitchen clock clicked to the next minute. He exhaled for the first time all day. Sunday tried to be normal and almost succeeded. Church online hummed from a tablet, while the boys built an altar from Lego. Malik cooked eggs badly, and Mo'Nique rescued them with salsa. For an hour, they were a regular family in a house that made it easy to pretend they were not public property. At dusk, Patrice materialized at the front door with eyes rimmed in red and a dress that looked like it had slept crumpled on a friend's couch. She had violated her own restraining order with the entitlement of someone who believed rules were furniture, movable and mostly decorative. "I need to talk to you, alone," she said, the last word cracking like a plate. "Whatever you have to say," Malik replied, "you can say in front of my family." Her gaze shot to Mo'Nique's left hand, bare, to the boys, guarded, to Malik, steady in a way she'd never bothered to memorize. She reached for every script that used to work. A tremble here, a confession there, a bouquet of excuses with satin ribbon. "I panicked. I was scared. I thought you'd lost everything." "That's exactly when people show you what everything means to them," Malik said, calm as a judge. She pivoted into venom. "You'll regret this. The courts, the press. I'm not afraid of cameras or courts," he said. "I'm afraid of boys who learn the wrong lesson about love." Elijah, who had been standing at his father's knee, trying to make himself smaller than his feelings, stepped forward with the solemn fury of old souls. "We're happy," he said. "Please leave." Patrice went very still, then very brittle. She turned, heels clicking toward a future she would have to narrate without them. The door closed. The house exhaled. In the strange quiet that followed, Malik poured juice and pretended his hands didn't shake. Mo'Nique touched his elbow. "You did the right thing." "I don't know what right looks like anymore," he said. "It looks like this," she answered, nodding toward the boys, who were now arguing about sprinkles like the world hadn't tried to tilt. Honest. Boring, sometimes, but honest. Monday, the lawyer called again. Divorce is proceeding fast. Her filings are aggressive but hollow. The judge won't like the restraining order play. Custody, since she's waived rights, is clear. Malik thanked him, ended the call, and stared at the family schedule Mo'Nique had taped to the fridge, the ordinary grid that had become a map out of madness. He realized the test was over. He realized it had never been about her answer. It had always been about his. That evening, after the boys' bath turned into a physics lesson about displacement and flood mitigation, Malik found Mo'Nique on the back steps, the blue hour laying a kind of mercy across her face. He sat beside her and let the porch light write a halo on the concrete. "I don't know what we are," he said, surprising himself with the tenderness of the confession. "I just know this house is different when you breathe in it." She stared at the garden. "We don't have to name anything. We can just be what we already are. A roof." He smiled despite the war in his chest. "You always do that." "What?" "Translate the storm." Somewhere inside, a timer chimed, reminding them that soup left on low will forgive almost anything if you remember it soon enough. They stood, two adults who had learned the cost of pretending, and returned to the kitchen where love smelled like onions and thyme, and the smallest boys in the world were learning that some people never leave. The week after the restraining order felt like learning to breathe in a new altitude. Mornings started with small courage. 3 boys lining up backpacks. Malik packing lunches without bargaining with his calendar. Mo'Nique scrawling affirmations on sticky notes and slipping them between notebooks like secret handshakes. The house, once a museum for anxiety, began to hum like a kitchen right before company arrives. Warm, purposeful, honest about its mess. Grief didn't vanish. It changed jobs. It stopped ambushing and started advising. When Xavier asked whether people who leave ever come back nice, Malik looked at Mo'Nique over the cereal bowls and chose a gentler truth. Sometimes they come back loud, he said. Sometimes they come back quiet. We can't control that. We can control keeping our door locked and our hearts unlocked. It sounded like a riddle. It felt like a plan. Routine did what social scientists keep telling us it does. It healed. Children in stable households show a 47% reduction in anxiety behaviors within 8 weeks of predictable routines, Mo'Nique quoted one afternoon, half teasing, fully correct. The triplets built an obstacle course of PVC pipes and pool noodles that required cooperation more than competition. Darnell timed sprints. Elijah designed scoreboards. Xavier announced events with the pomp of a ringmaster. Mo'Nique turned victories into fractions and setbacks into science. That fall? That's data, she'd say. And somehow scraped knees stopped feeling like verdicts. Malik's phone still throbbed with market rumors and board questions, but the hoax crisis no longer required performance. He'd told the truth, to himself, to Mo'Nique, and the relief moved through his day like better posture. At night, once the boys surrendered to sleep, he and Mo'Nique debriefed at the counter with tea that pretended it could fix everything. They didn't flirt so much as practice honesty in the same room. It was sexier than roses. One evening, she read aloud from a pamphlet she was assembling for the boys' school counselor, a practical guide about helping kids who test adults to see who stays. Attachment isn't clingy, she read. It's a child's way of asking, "Are you still here?" Malik leaned against the counter and watched her proofread with a red pen he recognized from his own study. He realized he'd never been more attracted to anyone in his life than to this woman thinking about his son's nervous systems. Around week 3, the boys started inventing celebrations for no reason. National Tuesday, Elijah declared, and they wore mismatched socks because Tuesday needed help. First day we didn't fight at recess day, Darnell proposed, and they ate cake after soup. Quiet but happy day, Xavier whispered, and they built a pillow fort so they could be loud about being quiet. Malik noticed how much of their joy was actually relief hardening into confidence. He noticed something else, too. Every night, after the dishwasher exhaled its final sigh, he and Mo'Nique lingered in the doorway like people who didn't want to break a spell. Once, when he reached to tuck a curl behind her ear, his hand hovered, then fell. She caught it, interlaced their fingers, and neither of them laughed, which is how he knew the moment wasn't a mistake. He could have waited a year. He could have waited forever. But the house felt like a question that wanted an answer. So he went to the only committee that mattered. "We need your help," he told the triplets after dinner, the way CEOs announce strategic initiatives. "Mission codename, Rooftop." "What's the KPIs?" Darnell asked, only half joking. Mo'Nique had created a monster and a future CFO. "The objective," Malik said, fighting a grin, "is to ask Mo'Nique to marry me, with your full co-leadership." Chaos performed a backflip into purpose. Elijah grabbed a notebook. Xavier sketched a ring that looked like a planet. Darnell created a timeline with milestones titled "Find Fairy Lights," "Practice Surprise Faces," and "Do not tell Mrs. Brooks until T30 minutes because she leaks." They debated fonts for a banner until Malik instituted a benevolent dictatorship favoring crayons. They chose the backyard gazebo for geography and symbolism. The boys insisted on a treasure hunt preamble. Each clue led to a memory. On the pantry door, a card that read, in Xavier's careful block letters, "For the day you made weird pancakes on purpose." In the laundry room, "For the night you stayed through a thunderstorm and taught us that bravery is a team sport." At the pool gate, for turning trouble into engineering. Each note was taped at boy height, evidence and hope sharing a clipboard. On the night of the plan, the garden looked like it had rehearsed its role. Fairy lights threw their soft glamour over the hedges. Flowers, pilfered gently from the front and redistributed, stood up straighter than usual. Mrs. Brooks hovered at the French doors like a stage manager who refuses to admit she's crying. Mo'Nique followed the boy's breadcrumbs with a skeptical smile that trembled at the edges. When she reached the gazebo, Malik was waiting in his best suit, the one he wore to make good news official, and 3 boys stood beside him in matching button-downs that tried very hard to behave. "Mo'Nique," he said, and his voice did the thing he hates in high-stakes pitches. It wavered. "You came into this house like a sentence we didn't know we needed. You turned chaos into choreography. You taught my sons what staying sounds like." He dropped to one knee. The boys on cue flanked him. Elijah steady, Darnell solemn, Xavier vibrating. "Will you marry our dad?" Elijah asked, nearly whispering. "And be our real mom?" Darnell added, pushing the words past a lump. "Forever, forever," Xavier clarified, because once doesn't cover it. Malik opened the velvet box. The ring wasn't the kind of diamond that starts fights on the internet. It was a light that knew its job. For a heartbeat, the world stopped pretending it was complicated. "Yes," Mo'Nique said, the words shattering into a laugh and tears. She did not glance at the ring before she looked at the boys. She looked at the life. They were still tangled in the kind of hug that rearranges spine and story when Mrs. Brooks appeared at the garden edge, panting as if she'd run the width of the house. "Mr. Malik," she called, trying to sound like she wasn't interrupting a movie's best scene. "Someone is at the front door. She says she's Mrs. Thompson, and it's urgent." The word urgent is a thief. It stole air from the gazebo and replaced it with history. Malik felt the old muscle memory, the one that tells men to protect, to posture, to perform, stiffen his shoulders. Monique's hand found his. "Together," she said. "We do this together." They walked as a family toward the foyer, where grand staircase and marble floor conspired to echo every bad decision anyone had ever made in houses like this. The door opened, and there she was, Patrice. Hair uncombed, mascara declaring defeat, blouse wrinkled the way only a night of bargaining with shame can wrinkle fabric. "I need to talk to you," she said, eyes landing on Malik, ricocheting to Mo'Nique, snagging on the ring that didn't apologize for existing. "Alone. Whatever you have to say," Malik replied, voice level enough to stand on. "You can say in front of my family." "Your family?" She laughed, a brittle sound that made the foyer colder. 3 months and you're engaged to—" Her gaze snapped back to Monique's face, narrowed. The sarcasm drained, replaced by something quieter and more dangerous. Recognition trying to remember itself. "Have we met?" "Plenty of people say I look familiar," Mo'Nique answered, choosing calm like armor. Patrice stepped closer, squinting as if the past were written in small type. "Your voice," she murmured. "Your—" She stopped, and panic leaked through her smirk. "Never mind. Malik, I made a mistake. I want to fix it. Let me come home." "This is home," Elijah said before his father could answer. The words came out steady. He surprised himself. He surprised all of them. Patrice flinched. "Sweetheart!" "Don't," Darnell said, small but iron. "You don't get to use names like keys." Malik swallowed the pride and ache that sentence delivered. He kept his eyes on Patrice. "There's nothing to fix here," he said. "There's just work to do somewhere else." Her chin lifted, defiance making a last bid. "You'll hear from my attorney. I look forward to the clarity," he said, and meant it. She stood there a beat longer, then turned and left the way storms sometimes do, sudden, then embarrassed. The door clicked. Silence arrived with a chair, sat down. Malik exhaled. Mrs. Brooks, unashamed now, dabbed at her eyes. Xavier, relieved, asked if the celebration was still legal. It was. But as the family drifted back toward fairy lights and cake that leaned because joy had no time for precision, Malik noticed Mo'Nique had gone pale in a way that wasn't about confrontation. She stared at the closed door like it had whispered a secret. "What is it?" he asked softly. "I don't know," she said, hand at her throat. Something in her eyes, in her voice, it felt like a door I locked a long time ago moved. He wanted to press. He didn't. "We'll open it together when you're ready." They returned to the garden and finished what they'd started, because joy deserves endings even when the next beginning has teeth. Later, with boys asleep, he and Mo'Nique stood under the porch light, their porch light, and let the day settle. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we keep the rule." "What rule?" she asked, though she already knew. "Together," he said, "always together." From the street, the house looked ordinary. Inside, a future clicked into place like a well-cut key. Neither of them knew the door it fit was older than their current courage. They would learn. But for tonight, the ring glowed. The boys dreamed easy, and two adults, exhausted and astonished, kept the porch light on. The night after the proposal should have ended with leftover cake and silly dancing. Instead, Malik and Mo'Nique lay awake, listening to the house breathe. The porch light drew a soft circle on the lawn. The fairy lights winked themselves to sleep, and somewhere in the quiet, something old tugged at Mo'Nique's memory like a sleeve. She rose, padded to the kitchen, and found Malik already there at the sink, rinsing glasses as if suds could settle a mind. "Tell me the name that's haunting you," he said without turning. "I don't have a name," she said, voice low. "Just a moment from long ago that refuses to stay put." He dried his hands, took her fingers, and waited with the patience of a man who has learned that answers arrive on their own timetable. "We'll follow it where it goes," he said, "but we follow it together." The next morning, together looked like paperwork. Malik called his attorney. Mo'Nique called the clinic where she'd once confirmed a pregnancy at 18, with trembling hands and no backup plan. The voice on the other end was new, kind, and curious. "We digitized old records last year," the records clerk said. "I'll see what I can find." She called back before lunch with a file number that might as well have been a drumbeat. St. Mary's. July 15th. Triplet live births recorded under Baby A, Baby B, Baby C. Discharge destination flagged as special adoption placement. Signed by a now disbarred attorney and a hospital administrator later fired for process irregularities. Mo'Nique gripped the counter with both hands, as if the earth had leaned. "They told me they died," she whispered. "They told me to grieve and move on." Malik swallowed the taste of rage. "They told me they were orphans who needed a home." He stared through the window into the yard where 3 boys were trying to balance on a single skateboard, failing gloriously. "We built a life on a forgery. Trauma researchers say the brain protects you from truth until you have the love required to survive it. Maybe that's why the next pieces came quickly. Too quickly." A retired nurse, hearing the names involved, agreed to speak under oath. A former paralegal from the adoption mill produced copies of forged consent forms. Mo'Nique's signature reproduced by a machine that didn't understand what signatures are for. The web traced back to 3 people: a corrupt lawyer, a hospital administrator who had since moved states, and Patrice, whose tidy social profile couldn't hide the pattern of payments routed through shell companies like Matryoshka dolls of deceit. Malik and Mo'Nique sat at the dining table and held the only conference that mattered. "We call the detectives," he said. "And then we call a child psychologist," she added, fierce even in fear. "So we tell the boys the truth with care instead of adrenaline." They told the boys that afternoon, knees touching on the couch. The kind of circle that says you're safe even if what you hear makes the floor look different. "There's news," Malik began, the words softer than headlines, heavier than casual. "The best kind," Mo'Nique added, and let the smile in her eyes carry what her voice couldn't. "We found out the story of how we became a family is even more of a miracle than we knew." "Are we in trouble?" Elijah asked. "Because kids think they caused the weather." "No," Malik said, steady. "But people who lied to us are." "About what?" Darnell whispered. "About you," Mo'Nique said, tears bright but contained. "About us, about how we all belonged together from the start." It took time. Each boy asked questions at his own speed, circled back on his own spiral. Children handle truth the way they handle merry-go-rounds. Some grip, some lean. All need an adult in reach. By dinner, the questions had slowed. By bedtime, 3 heads rested on 2 chests in a heap that looked like a blessing someone forgot to fold away. The detectives moved faster than TV, but slower than fury. Within 2 weeks, subpoenas pried open folders that wished to remain shut. One morning at 10:17, the doorbell rang with the gravity of consequence. Officers stood with polite faces and handcuffs that gleamed like punctuation. Patrice was arrested at a spa, a detail the evening news found irresistible. The former hospital administrator was picked up in another state, halfway through reinventing himself. The bad lawyer, cornered by paperwork, folded like old linen. Malik expected relief to roar. Instead, it sighed. The boys watched the coverage in the den, flanked by Mrs. Brooks and bowls of popcorn that went uneaten. "Will she go to jail?" Xavier asked. "Likely," Malik said. "For how long?" Elijah pressed, trying to measure what justice weighs. "As long as the judge decides it takes for the law to remember we matter," Mo'Nique said. "And as long as it takes for other people like her to think twice." The district attorney called it what it was: trafficking disguised as charity, theft dressed up in legalese. The plea came months later. 15 years for Patrice. Similar terms for her co-conspirators. The network dismantled one affidavit at a time. Malik did not attend the sentencing. He spent that morning where justice actually lives, in a school gym with folding chairs, as the triplets received a ribbon for a science fair project titled "How Bridges Hold." They'd built 3 models, one that collapsed under showed weight, one that wobbled, one that stood. "It's in the trusses," Darnell explained to the judges, eyes proud and shy. Mo'Nique blinked a private flood. Not every day was triumph. Some nights Xavier woke from dreams where doors wouldn't open. Some mornings Elijah got quiet in that way he does before a storm. Except now he told someone and the storm moved through without wreckage. Darnell took to journaling like oxygen, filling pages with equations and feelings and drawings of a house labeled ours. They started family therapy. They prayed before pasta, laughter inflecting gratitude. They reclaimed small traditions that make big resilience. When the divorce finalized, the judge looked at Malik and said, "You came through a storm and kept a roof over your children. That matters here." Later, on a softer morning, under an arch made of grocery store flowers and boy-made streamers, Malik and Mo'Nique married at home. The vows were both ordinary and outrageous. He promised to load the dishwasher the way she liked. She promised to steal him for walk when spreadsheets pretended to be God. The boys, in matching suits, read lines they'd written themselves. "Thank you for finding us," Elijah said. "Thank you for staying when it was hard," Darnell added. "Thank you for purple pancakes," Xavier finished, and everyone laughed the kind of laugh that releases old air. The house changed too. Not the big one. The marble foyer had never learned their names. They chose the place where the hall kept the sound of socked feet, where the kitchen island had nicked corners from homework nights, where the backyard oak provided a climbing syllabus. They kept the gazebo lights, though. Fairy lights aren't magic. They just remind you to look. Months pass whether you honor them or not. Malik sold the last pricey car with the tender satisfaction of a man unsubscribing from the wrong mailing list. He built new board habits. Less noise, more nerve. No, said early. Mo'Nique launched a tiny nonprofit out of the dining room called Healing Hearts, quietly connecting families and caregivers with trauma-informed play strategies, sliding scale therapy, and the radical luxury of trustworthy information. Donations arrived like weather, steady, sometimes surprising. A retired principal sent $20 and a thank you note that said simply, "You turned panic into pedagogy." The boys grew in the ways kids do when no one is auditioning for control of their story. Elijah discovered he could make friends without making messes first. Darnell coded a robotics kit into a piano-playing arm and grinned like the sun had a joke. Xavier learned that performance isn't pretending, it's telling the truth with your whole face. On the anniversary of the night everything cracked open, Malik grilled in the backyard while Mo'Nique set a long table with mismatched plates and that deep, unstoppable calm that follows a storm's retirement party. Neighbors came. Mrs. Brooks told the funny version of events. Kiara, who'd introduced Mo'Nique to the school counselor, brought peach cobbler that made grown men consider poetry. As twilight layered itself over the yard, Malik stood to speak, nerves suddenly a chorus. "I used to think fortune was a number," he said. "Now I know it's a practice." He took a breath. If you're watching this later on your phone or in a break room with a lukewarm coffee, hear me. Love is logistics. Family is a verb. And boundaries are not walls. They're doors with locks you control. He looked at the boys, then at the woman who had taught all of them how to stay. "We lost time," he said. "We did not lose ourselves." Before the night ended, he did the thing he never imagined doing when this story began. He turned to the camera they'd set up on the porch, because the internet is a town square, and some town squares still tell the truth. And he asked anyone listening to do 3 small things that change lives more than outrage does. Tell us where you're watching from. Type 1 sentence you can live with in the quiet and in public. "I'm setting a boundary," or "I'm asking for help," or "I'm starting over without shame." And if this gave you a map, hit like so the algorithm doesn't bury stories where messy people heal. Subscribe, because next week we're sharing free routines that make mornings kinder and a checklist for spotting predatory paperwork. Share this with someone who thinks endurance is the same as belonging. He clicked the camera off. The porch light stayed on. Later that night, after the dishwasher's last sigh and the boys' last, "One more minute," Malik and Mo'Nique stood at the window and let their city practice hope. The hiss of tires on damp pavement, a far saxophone leaning hard on one beautiful phrase. They spoke their benediction out loud, so the walls would memorize it. May we never confuse noise with love, wealth with worth, endurance with belonging. May our receipts be neat, our boundaries bright, our tables long. May we forgive without partnering with harm. May our children learn that truth is a kind of shelter. Mo'Nique turned, slipped her hand into Malik's, and smiled like a woman who has finally arrived where the map was always leading. "We're not the storm," she said. "No," he answered, looking at the home that had built them as much as they had built it. "We're the roof. If you're ready to be a roof, for yourself, for your people, say so below. Then come back tomorrow. We'll cook. Next week, we'll walk through contracts that protect instead of punish. Next month, Maybe you'll stand under your own porch light at midnight, feel the wind change, and know you built your house different, on purpose.